Hello guys, good morning.
Good morning, Sandeep.
Morning, Sunny.
We start. Okay, so we can start then. Pooja HP.
Yes, Sandeep.
Why you not joined yesterday's Q&A?
I have a cab at 8:30, Sandeep. When I go to office, I will not be able to join the time.
Okay, did you inform Sandeep?
No. Usually I'll inform him, but yesterday I didn't inform.
I just shared my screen. Able to see my screen?
Yes, Sandeep.
Yes, Sandeep.
Okay. So let's have a discussion on config maps. Okay, in Kubernetes. So what is this config maps and why do we use this in Kubernetes and what do we implement? Let's have a discussion on this. So config maps is basically an API object. It is used to store the configuration data, like in key value pairs, like similar to secrets. Is config map is basically meant for non-sensitive data. Okay, so non-sensitive data in the sense we should understand when we're making a statement, we should aware of if they asked what is mean by non-sensitive data and the sensitive data. Veerbhadra, when I asked the same question to you, you were not even clear on our statement,
Yes.
correct? When you are saying about, I remember that you mentioned non-sensitive data, right? If you are saying non-sensitive data means the configuration of application like URLs, ports, port numbers, and variables, which is hard coded, right? So we call it as non-sensitive data. When it comes to the sensitive data, your password, your tokens, right? The configuration tokens and the password, so-called sensitive data, correct? That you need to understand properly before making your statement. Okay. Anyways, so config maps is basically it is used to store the configuration data in key value pairs. Okay. So say suppose it might be environment name, or it might be namespaces, or it might be the application configs, URLs, or port numbers. Suppose if you are handling multiple services, you need to pass it to some port number to that service, to the another service, right? That is the case we use config maps. And also some of the URLs that you need to pass it to the pods, you need to pass it to the nodes. That is the case, we should make use of config maps. Okay, so now config maps is an API object. It is used to store configuration data in key value pairs. Okay, it is similar to secrets but not the sensitive data. Okay, so it is similar to secrets, but config maps are meant for non-sensitive data, that is application configuration, URLs, port numbers, so-called sensitive data. Okay, so I'll give a definition here. config maps is an API object. You guys are with me, right? Used to store.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Used to store configuration data in key value pairs. Okay, so it is similar to secrets, but config maps are meant for non-sensitive data. Okay, so when we are talking about non-sensitive data, we should mention what is mean by this non-sensitive data. Okay, so when we are saying about the non-sensitive data, app config, right, and application config and URLs, right, URLs, port number. Okay, so we call it as non-sensitive data. So when it comes to the sensitive data, your tokens, your secrets, yesterday we hard coded the secret, right, that we created from Kubernetes, right, that we call it as sensitive data. Those datas we will not handle via the config maps. We will handle only the application configuration part, like app config, URLs, port numbers. Getting my point? So it is basically to uh, pass the like application environment or port number, or it might be the host name, right? Might be the host name, right? So that's how we use. See, these things we need to pass it to the other. Let's say the pod required some of the config maps. Okay, some of the non-sensitive data. That is the case. We make use of config maps. Are you clear on this statement? In terms of YAML configuration, we're gonna pass it as a key value pair. Suppose if you want to pass app config, configuration of application, as a dependency to the other pod, we pass this, and similarly the URLs might be need to pass, and similarly for the port number that we need to pass it to the pods, and similarly for the host name. Okay, clear on this statement? Config maps.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, now what purpose we use config map? Okay, purpose of config map. So what purpose we make use of config map? Okay, so it is basically, so as I mentioned, I'm gonna give it point wise here. Purpose of config map. Okay, so it is used to define the app configuration, which means application configuration. It is used to define the application configuration, that is URLs, ports, port number, host number, or the host name. Okay, and similarly the second point is used to keep the configuration separate. Okay, so it is used to keep the configuration separate from container images. Okay, so that means, see why we use this, we are keeping the configuration separately instead of passing it directly into the YAML configuration of pod or node, we are passing the secrets, kind of secrets. We are passing the non-sensitive data via the config maps, so that we are keeping the configuration separate from the container and the images, right? Container and the images. So it will be easier to, so it will be easier to update. It will be easier to update the image or application, image or container, right? Say suppose if you want to update your container without disturbing your actual YAML file of pod, actual YAML file of your node, we are passing it to the config map. Whenever we need to change some application configuration, port number or host name, we make use of config maps. Okay, are you guys with me?
Yes, Sandeep.
Okay. Now, what is the usage of config map, right? So usage in the sense, say suppose there are multiple usage for config map. So I have listed some of the usage of config map here. So as an, see, config map we can use as a environment variables inside pod. Okay, so as a environment variables inside pod. Okay, so as environment variables inside pod, see suppose if you want to use the environment to the pod without defining in the pod, we make use of config map. Because see here, what is the statement that I have given here? It is used to keep the configuration separate from containers and the images, right? So that we can have updates of image or the container. Okay, so we can also use as a environment variables inside a pod, right? Similarly, as a configuration file, mounted into a pod, as a configuration file mounted into a pod. So this is the case we use config map. Okay, so we're gonna pass as an environment variable inside the pod and also as a configuration file. Configuration file in the sense is, say suppose if you want to have any dependency of that configuration, that pod is required to get the app configuration, we also pass it via the config map. Okay, clear with this?
Yes,
Are you guys clear on this?
yes, sir.
Yes. Now, see, as I said, it is also a kind of secrets that I have mentioned. Now, let's think on the difference between config map versus secrets, right? We need to understand clearly, right? Difference between, so when we know the difference only, you will be able to implement each of concept or component in Kubernetes. Okay, so difference between config map and secrets, right? Let's let's see what is the difference and what we feel the difference between config map and secrets. See, in case of config map, so as I said already, config map so defines, it stores the non-sensitive data, right? It stores the non-sensitive data, correct? So when we are talking about non-sensitive data, we should be very clear on what we are saying here. When we are saying non-sensitive data, example, application configuration, right? And URLs, right? And port number and the host name, right? That we call it as sensitive data. Similarly, what do we have for secrets? So see, both we call it as config map is also called as secrets, and secrets we also call it as secrets, correct? We do create a secrets and we hard coded it and we call it in the YAML file, correct, right? Correct, right?
Yes, sir.
Similarly, if that is the case, what is secrets? What secrets will store? Okay, so it stores the sensitive data. Okay, so it stores the sensitive data, right? For example, when we are talking about the sensitive data, that is password, correct? Tokens, right? And what else? Password, tokens, and okay, might be let's keep these two as of now. Only we have two, right? Uh, Credentials. The passwords and credentials both the same, but sometimes somebody uses credentials and some may use passwords. Okay, let's keep it this way. I'll give it this. Okay, so clear on this? See, when we are saying about the config map, it stores the non-sensitive data. Means the application configuration, that there is a dependency in a pod that needs to be passes to the pod as a application configuration in terms of YAML. Okay, and also the URLs and also the port number we're gonna pass it, right? And the host name. Similarly, for secrets, it stores the sensitive data. Example, password, tokens, and credentials. Okay, now let's write a YAML file to for simple Nginx pod. Okay, let's create a config map and let's pass it to the pod, Nginx pod. Okay, now you will be able to understand this config map. Similar example. Okay, now let's write a YAML file for config map. Say suppose if your Nginx required some dependency of the SQL database, right? So for that, let's create a config map for uh, YAML file. Let's create a YAML file for config map and let's pass it. Let's pass those non-sensitive data to the pod. Okay. Now what I'm gonna do, I'll directly okay. I'll write it here first. Uh, let's have a YAML creation for config map, right? API version is what? Currently we are in V1 only, right? And kind what? Config map, right? In kind we're gonna write config map under metadata. Okay, so I'm gonna write here is the metadata name. I'm gonna write it here, that is app config. Okay, and also the data that we need to pass it, the data that we need to have it in the config map, that is app mode. Okay, so under app mode I'm going to define it as production, and similarly app port I'm gonna define here is 8080, and similarly the DB host. Okay, the DB host, I'm gonna define it here as MySQL. Okay, dot default dot svc dot cluster dot local. Just a minute, guys. Sorry. Yes, so these three are the non-sensitive data that we're going to create it from the config map. Okay, example via the config map, and we're going to create it from the config map. These three, we're going to pass it to the pod. Okay, let's see how we're going to create this. These three send non-sensitive data to the pod. Right now, let's write the configuration file for pod to pass these three into the pod. Right now, basically we do apply this config map and we do create this. Okay, now I'm gonna write the application config, sorry, the YAML file for pod. Okay, API version. See, this configuration file is separate and this is separate. Okay, the API version v1 kind pod, right? Pod only we are creating here. L should be in capital. Pod, and the third parameter metadata, right? Under metadata, I'm gonna define it here as name of the application, which is my app. Okay, and the fourth component is spec. Under spec, we're gonna define it here as container specification. Correct? Just a minute. Okay, so under spec, we're gonna pass it as containers, right? And under containers, I'm gonna define as container name as my app, and here I'm gonna point it as image. Image should come here. Image as Nginx. Let's keep the version 1.25 or 1.24. Any version that you can keep it. Now, above we created config map, right? Then how do we call that in the pod? These three that should pick with Nginx pod, right? The config map that we are passing it as non-sensitive data as app mode, app port, DB host, right? Then how do we call that into the pod? Okay, we use environment from. Okay, so env environment from where? Config map, right? Config map reference hyphen config map ref. Okay, so below this I'm gonna define it here as name colon. See, name should come here after the module. Okay, name. So what is our config map name? Under metadata, app config, correct? So we'll write it here. Okay, so this is how we're gonna call these non-sensitive data into the pod. Getting this? Okay, now let's deploy this config map and pod and let's see how it works. and we have called the config map as app config. Okay, it should pick these three values. Okay. Now what I'll do, I'm gonna log into the instance first. Kubernetes. Let's start the instance. Are you guys practicing on all the concepts and attending all QA sessions, right?
Yes, Sandeep.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Because we need to start your placements here. Credentials, we're gonna point at the key. And might be Sandeep has told you to meet Sandeep, right? Today. For some people, for some candidate.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Whatever the doubts that you have, you can ask with him and he gonna clear on this. Okay. Yes, I've logged in. Let's spin up a cluster. Creates this. See, whatever we're doing this, can you guys do this automation? See, as soon as we log into the instance, we are installing and we are creating a minikube, right? Is it possible to do the automation? Just if I run the script, your minikube will get spin up,
Okay.
right? See what, you will have to pick the instance. You will have to deploy a what Terraform template, create an instance automatically, and inside that instance, your pod should get spin up. Okay, can you guys do this? Anyways, you are aware of the Terraform template to deploy the EC2 instance, correct?
Yes.
Yes, Sandeep.
And you can log into that instance, and as soon as it logged in, your pod should get spinned up, and it should creates the required node and required pod, right? And whatever the service that inside that, you can deploy your Helm with all the services like your config map, your daemon set, affinity, anti-affinity, your pods, nodes, services, uh, deployments, right? You can implement those, right? So
Yes.
called the automation, whatever we discussed till today, till now, we are using all the concepts as a part of automation, as a part of CI/CD. Okay. Now let's set this to Kubernetes kubectl alias. Okay, kubectl get pods. Oh, this is from the stateful sector. Kubectl get yes. Let's delete this. Kubectl delete stateful set is equal. Okay, now if I run this get pods, yes. Okay, now this my app is running. Kubectl delete pods. My app. Okay, so now nothing is running in the server. Now what we created a config map, correct? So where is it? Here it is. Let's copy this. You were able to understand this config map, right?
Yes.
The kind as config map. Under metadata, I'm going to keep it as app config as a config map name, and I'm going to creating the config map for 3 non-sensitive data, which is app mode, app port, db host. Okay. Now, if I'm creating this to the config map, vi config map dot yml. Shit. Should be very careful when I'm writing. Config. Okay, config map, right? Vi config map dot yml. Okay, I'm gonna. Okay. Now I'll save this. Okay. Now I'm gonna deploy this kubectl apply -f config map dot yml. kubectl apply -f config map dot yml. Now this config map is created. Similarly, we do have this pod created. Okay, see, we are deploying it separately, right? Now pi pod dot yml. Okay, let's save this and apply pod dot yml. Okay, pod dot yml. Now the pod is created by making use of those config map, right? kubectl get config map. kubectl get config map, correct? See, when we print this, when we run this config map, we can see the config app, correct? kubectl get config map -o wide. Sorry,
Sir, you
-o.
typed VOD.
Yes, sir. Yes, madam. Config map -o wide. Okay. Now, suppose if we want to describe it, right? kubectl describe describe config map. kubectl describe config map. We're gonna see this, right? So when we describe this, the name of the config map, that is app config, and the namespace default. See, if you want to deploy with a particular customized namespace, you can add it here. Okay, in the see, whatever, if you are not mentioning the namespace, it will go to the default namespace. See, whatever the service that we create, either you create a secrets, either you create a config map, either you create a daemon set, stateful set, anything, affinity, anti-affinity. If you want to deploy it into the particular namespace, you mention the namespace in the YAML file so that it will get deployed. Correct, right? Before that, those namespaces should be available in your locally. Okay, getting my point? And if you are not, the namespaces, if they're not available in your local workspace, your application will not get deployed. Getting my point? That's how it works. Okay, and the labels and annotations data. See, here you can see data, right? The app port 80 and the DB host, this should be, and the app mode production, right? Correct, right? So that's how we do create the config map, right? Now if I run kubectl get pods Okay, kubectl get pods. So we can see my app, right? This we deployed through, uh, we use the config map sensitive data, non-sensitive data, right? Let's see how it works. What it is used. Okay, now see, we can see the pod which we deployed. Let's describe this. Kubectl describe pod my app, right? So here we can see the pod is up and running and it is successfully tagged with the secrets config map that we configured here. Environment variables from, you can see here, app config map, right? It is tagged, right? Whatever the, see, instead of the purpose of config map, I'm saying again now, the purpose of config map, instead of passing this particular mode of particular say like it's a variables, okay, in terms of config map, we are passing it to the config map reference. See, when we use this, say suppose if you wanted to do some deployments in production, we make use of config map. Getting my point? Suppose similarly, if you want to deploy some data, the application config or the port number, or maybe instead of DB host, you might have the other host URL, right? If you want to deploy it, you will create a config map immediately and you will deploy it to this particular pod. There are n number of pods, n number of nodes which are running in the huge amount of project. That is the case, we use config map. Clear with this?
And here you mounted all the whole file itself, right? Not a single variable.
Yes. See, it picks the config map values. The data that I have pointed here is 3. What is your question?
Here you have mounted the whole. We can use the config map as 2 as, right? We can directly mount a single variable or even a single key value pair or even the whole file itself.
See,
And in
what?
this situation,
One minute. Whatever. See, suppose if you want to use a single variable, you can directly use it in the pod, right? For multiple, the purpose of config map here is when we wanted to when we are passing this basically into the pod, it looks like we will not keep this non-sensitive data in the pod configuration when we are aware of this config map. Okay, now it is not the file that we are calling. We are calling it, you say that we are calling it to config map, not the file. What we have in the config map, we have 3 data. Okay, it will be called 3 data, and this pod will get created using app mode, app port, and DB host. So the pod will get created by using these 3 data.
what if we have 10 or 20 key value pairs and we only need 2 or 3 for this particular pod?
You can see when your config map is having a data of 10 value, you can add the particular app mode here, config map reference name and the value. You can add it here. Say suppose if you need only the app mode, right? And you can add it here. And also similarly you can add the value DB host. You can add the values directly here.
Okay.
You getting my point?
Yeah, this is what I asked. Okay.
Yes. So okay, out of 10 values, say suppose if your config map is the value of 10, your pod is in a required of 2 values. You can add the value here, okay, of 2, except that it will pick these 2 values and it will get deployed, the particular values.
Okay.
Clear with this?
Yes.
Any questions Any doubts? This is the last concept in Kubernetes. We have covered everything, and I do have the list of questions that I need to work on. This config maps is covered, right? Who gave this question?
It was me, I think so. Me itself.
Okay. Any questions on this?
No questions.
Okay. If not, I'll remove this.
Okay.
And I do have 4. Then I'll work on in further sessions. Anybody has any questions, guys? Anything that you want to understand? Any questions on this config map? Anything? Maybe other concept also is fine for me.
Sandeep, I have one doubt. This config maps I have attached to the pod. Okay, so my pod is already running. If I change that config map, that pods will be failed, right?
Yes, you need to redeploy your pod.
Okay.
See, you are making changes to your pod, correct?
Yes.
You need to modify your pod of YAML calling your config. Have you tried deployed your config map? Did your pod get crashed?
Yes.
What is the error?
I thought like it will automatically pull from the config, but it is failed. But I was not aware this. That's why I was stuck there.
No. Wait. What is the config map? Is it really required to add those non-sensitive data into the pod? If that is the case, if your pod is not dependent with your config map, your pod will not get up and running. It will get crash because you are passing it to your pod, which is unwanted data, right? See here we need the sensitive data of. Let's remove this. Sensitive data of app mode, port, and DB host. Okay, that's why this pod is getting updated and it is up and running. If these 3 are not required, this pod will not get up and run. It will get crashed. If your pod is getting crashed, you are passing unwanted data in terms of config map. Getting my point?
Yes.
And even though when you point your config map, you need to redeploy your pod. And you need to see what is the error, how you are going to fix that. Any questions? Any doubts, guys?
No questions in this config.
Okay, so we have done with all the Kubernetes discussion here. Okay, so from tomorrow onwards, we'll have a discussion on Terraform. If you have a doubt on any concept, on any tool, you can ask me. Because we're gonna have full-fledged Q&A from tomorrow. Okay, so till we are taking Q&A with very basic level. Okay, we do have each candidate for weekends 2 to 3 hours, and we're gonna shortlist. We'll pick those profiles and we'll start for the placement. Okay, so let's have a discussion on Terraform. For the Terraform on the instance creation, right? Yes. So let's have a discussion on let's create a EKS. Let's see whether we are able to create EKS in AWS. Okay. Then let's see what are the services that we are able to create and how do we implement this in Terraform. See, basically, as I said, the Terraform is an infrastructure tool. Whatever the service that we are providing from AWS, we're gonna create it from Terraform. That's it. You fix in your mind. If you want to create your load balancers, your VPC or S3, whatever the service that you learned from Wiki, right? Correct, right? Wiki has given some of the services. He has explained.
Yes,
You guys
sir.
are with me or
Yes, sir.
you are somewhere else? So those services we are able to create from Terraform. That's it. So Terraform is basically the infrastructure maintenance tool where we write a templates. Okay. So we deploy it. Clear?
Yes, Pandit.
Okay. I'll do share this in the group. Please work on all the concepts. Please.
Sir, I'm having a doubt.
Yes.
Sir, in the secrets you given the definition, right? In the definition you have given that, for example, for secrets it is tokens. Tokens means API tokens, right?
Yes. Tokens in the sense API token only.
Okay, sir.
Here you're saying
Sir?
this is what you said, right?
Yeah, yes, sir. The tokens, right? Tokens means API tokens.
Yes, API tokens. Apart from the tool.
Okay, sir. Thank
So when we are it is API tokens only. Have
No,
you
sir.
used GitLab tokens? How you cloned your repository?
Yes, sir. GitHub I
You used GitLab, right?
Sir.
How you clone GitHub repository to your local?
Git clone space URL name.
Okay. When you are running this Git clone, suppose if you are new to that GitHub, suppose you created a GitHub account today and you are new to that, right?
Okay,
How you configure to clone to run this Git clone from your GitHub to your local? You're not getting? Okay. Okay, let's make it simple. You have an account created in GitHub. There are some repositories which are available. You are logged into GitHub account newly. You are new to the GitHub. You joined today. Okay. You need to clone some of the repositories from GitHub to your local. There are some projects which are available already. Now my question here is, when you joined today, you will have to clone your GitHub repository to your local. How you
Git space around method and space have to pass the URL of
correct,
the
right?
repository.
Now, when you are running your Git clone, you will have to do some configuration, right?
Yes, sir.
Without simply when you
Yes,
run
sir.
Git clone, not correct, right? What is its configuration we do? What configuration that we do?
Username and password.
You will get two links, right? One is the SSH and the other one is the HTTPS, correct?
Yes, sir.
Are you aware of these or are you getting confused?
No, sir, I'm aware of that only, but the credentials we use, right, a password, and that's, I think.
Okay, when you use HTTPS, you will have to pass your username and password in your local, where you will use in locally.
Yes, sir, in local.
Okay, there is one more URL, SSH, right?
Yes, sir.
When we are cloning via the SSH, normally when we are doing an automation, we will not prefer HTTPS link. We do prefer SSH.
SSH.
Say suppose when you are configuring your Jenkins pipeline, what cloning method we do? Suppose if you want to do the checkout from Jenkins, what cloning method you do?
SSH keygen.
Correct, right? We SSH keygen. What is mean by SSH keygen?
No, not SSH keygen. Username and password we use, right?
See, don't confuse here. Username and password part is done for HTTPS link. I'm asking, there is one more link for SSH. Clear?
Yes, sir.
That when do we use SSH? And what do we use in SSH?
To get an public IP copy in the Git, we use SSH key.
Where you will get public IP?
SSH keygen.
Where you will get SSH keygen? Rakshita, I'm asking you.
Yes, sir.
Are you clear on the concept?
Yes, sir. I need to work.
You are not clear. No, you no need to work. You are unfit to this industry. Seriously. You are not even clear. You are not even saying the proper statement for each concept. Who referred you?
Swami, sir.
You can talk to Swami. You can say the same thing. See, if we are explaining something, you need to understand it clearly, right? When we get completed, when we complete the Git, it's been
2
5
months.
months that you are in the system, right? You are learning the tools and you are understanding and you are joining the sessions and you are understanding some concepts. You will be able to tell at least the understanding level of concept. We don't see here. Are you ready to join the organization, or you are simply attending here for the namesake and learning the things here?
No,
See,
sir.
what did I ask you? Just I asked a simple question. When do we use SSH link? This is very, very basic. Not even zero. What is happening here? Okay, let's go to others. Anybody has any questions? Yes. Some people want to go to office and they need to work again. Anybody has any questions, guys?
No.
Okay, if not, let's wind up the session. Let's connect tomorrow for Terraform.
Okay.
See, we are planning to close it by before festival. Festival in the sense, Ganesh festival. Okay. On before 27 or 28, even another 5 days. Let's have a discussion on Terraform and rest of the concepts. And might be Sandeep has told to visit. He told some of the candidates, right? You can come and
Yes.
see the configuration that he has handling and will show the configuration setup. Okay. Fine then. Let's connect tomorrow. Thank you. I'll share this in the group.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.